Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm David Carlisle here with Harper Bennett. Harper, I want to start today with a number that completely stopped me in my tracks. A massive study from the Centre for Talent Innovation found that 30% of college-educated professionals working full-time have a disability. 30%. But only 3.2% actually self-identify as disabled to their employers.
Wait, 3.2%? Out of 30? That means nearly 90% of disabled professionals in the workplace are just flying under the radar, working twice as hard to hide the very thing they probably need support for.
Exactly. 9 out of 10 people are choosing the exhaustion of hiding over the risk of disclosing. And as a teacher who spends half his day trying to get kids to embrace their neurodiversity, I will never say that word perfectly on the first try, I swear. Neurodiversity. Perfection is a myth, people. But seeing that drop off from 30% to 3.2% breaks my heart, because it means the fear of stigma is still beating out the necessity of support.
It's a terrifying math equation every disabled person runs in their head. I ran it when I got my first occupational therapy job. You sit there looking at an HR form thinking, if I check this box, will my boss look at me and see a liability instead of a clinician? But the irony is, hiding it usually damages your performance more than the disability itself.
So when do you tell them? I feel like the timing is a massive variable here. Doing it on day one of a new job has to feel completely different than doing it 5 years in, right?
Night and day difference. If you disclose during the honeymoon phase, like right after you sign the offer letter but before you start, you're establishing a baseline. You're essentially saying, here is the exact operating manual for Harper Bennett to be your best employee. But disclosing mid-career, that usually happens because you've hit a wall, a new symptom flared up, or the job demands changed, and suddenly you're backpedaling to explain why your productivity dipped last Tuesday.
The operating manual for Harper Bennett. I love that phrasing because it shifts the focus from what's wrong with you to how you work best.
Yes! And that is the secret weapon of disclosure. You have to move from medical talk to functional talk. Your manager does not need to know the Latin name of your spinal cord injury or the cellular mechanism of your autoimmune disease. They need to know what you need to execute the role.
Give me an example of that translation. How do you take the medical Latin and turn it into functional English?
I have severe lumbar radiculopathy that causes neuropathic pain spikes in the afternoon, which makes a manager panic and think you need an ambulance, versus saying, I have a physical condition that makes sitting for more than 4 hours painful. To hit my afternoon deliverables, I need a standing desk and a 15-minute screen break at 2 p.m.
I need a standing desk and a 15-minute break. That is so wonderfully boring. You took this terrifying medical mystery and turned it into an office supply request.
Exactly. And that perfectly boring request is the kickoff to what the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, calls the interactive process, which sounds like a terrible corporate team-building exercise, but it's actually the most important legal mechanism in workplace accommodations.
Right, the interactive process, which, from what I've seen advocating for my kids' IEPs, people completely misunderstand. They think it's a courtroom. You make a demand, the employer bangs a gavel and says yes or no. But the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, specifically defines it as a collaborative dialogue.
Collaborative dialogue is HR speak for, we are going to pass emails back and forth for a month. But you're right, it's not a binary yes or no. If I ask for a specific voice-to-text software that costs $5,000, the company doesn't have to buy that exact one. They just have to provide an effective alternative.
You know what this reminds me of? Baking sourdough.
I was waiting for the bread analogy. Tell me how federal disability law is like your kitchen, David.
Stick with me. With sourdough, you don't just dump water and flour in a bowl and scream, "Give me bread in an hour." It's a dialogue with the dough. You mix it, you wait 30 minutes, you do a stretch and fold, you wait another hour. If the dough is too wet, you adjust. The interactive process requires that exact same patience. It's a stretch and fold. You propose an accommodation, the employer assesses it, maybe they push back because of cost, so you fold in a new idea. You're shaping it together over time.
Okay, that actually works. But the key to that stretch and fold is documentation. You have to keep a paper trail. Not as a weapon, but as a shared roadmap. On October 12th, we agreed to try a hybrid schedule. On November 1st, we will review if the Tuesday deliverables are still being met. It keeps everyone accountable to the dough, so to speak.
But what happens when the dough just completely falls flat? What happens when the employer throws down the undue hardship card? Because legally, under the ADA, an employer can deny an accommodation if it causes significant difficulty or expense, right?
Right. If you work at a 3-person startup and ask them to install a $50,000 elevator, that's an undue hardship. They literally can't afford it. But when an employer plays that card, it's not the end of the conversation. It's a pivot point. If they say, "We can't do the elevator," your next move is, "Okay, then can we move my workstation to the ground floor? Or can I work remotely 3 days a week?" The interactive process doesn't stop just because one idea failed.
And this is where we start moving beyond just ADA compliance and into actual workplace culture. Because if you have a manager who treats the interactive process like a genuine collaboration, you don't have to be a legal scholar to survive at work.
This is the whole ball game. Compliance is the floor. Culture is the ceiling. And the best-kept secret of workplace accommodations is that they almost always lead to universal design.
Give me the quick definition of universal design for people who aren't familiar.
It's the idea that designing an environment for people with disabilities ultimately makes it better for everyone. Think about curb cuts on sidewalks. They were fought for by wheelchair users in the 1970s, but today they're used by parents with strollers, delivery workers with hand trucks, travelers with rolling luggage.
So the office equivalent would be noise-cancelling headphones?
Exactly. Someone with ADHD might request noise-canceling headphones as an official accommodation to block out open office distractions. But once the company normalizes people wearing headphones at their desks, suddenly the neurotypical guy in accounting realizes he can focus better too. Flexible hours, written agendas before meetings, captioning on Zoom calls, these start as disability accommodations and end up being universally beloved perks.
It changes the narrative from "this person is a drain on our resources" to "this person is actually beta testing a better way for all of us to work." That is a massive cultural shift.
It is. And honestly, it's why I keep this little collection of miniature carabiners on my backpack zipper.
Wait, like the climbing clips? I've seen those on your bag. I assumed they were just aggressively outdoorsy aesthetic choices.
No! Well, yes, I love adaptive rock climbing. But every time I conquer a really difficult, terrifying conversation, whether it's self-advocating for a medical need or pushing a company to rethink an inaccessible policy, I add a mini carabiner to my bag. It's a physical reminder that I clipped in, I took the risk, and I didn't fall.
I love that. You're literally collecting trophies for difficult conversations. So, for the listener right now who wants to earn their first carabiner, who wants to test the waters with their manager but isn't ready to drop a formal HR medical file on their desk, what is one small question they can ask tomorrow?
Keep it entirely focused on workflow. Tomorrow, say to your manager, I've noticed I do my best deep work when I have unbroken focus. Could we experiment with blocking out my calendar from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. next week, just to see if my output improves?
Could we experiment? That is brilliant. It's not a permanent demand, it's a test. It's low stakes for the manager.
Exactly. And if they say yes and it works, you've just initiated the interactive process without ever invoking the ADA. You're just two people figuring out how to get the best work done.
That is a perfect place to leave it. Start with the experiment, build the culture, and maybe buy yourself a tiny carabiner. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you next time.